Hello and welcome to Owning the Narrative. I am Bulow. The show will feature the top news of the week, complete with my observations, and even a little bit of sarcasm thrown in. The top news stories will be taken from my morning news briefings that I write on the Rick Bulow New Media blog every weekday morning. If you go on to like what you see, smash that thumbs up button. And now, let's go right into the news. In 15 days, the 117th Congress will meet to count the electoral votes and certify that Joe Biden is the president-elect, quote unquote. However, there may be a few challenges. This from the Epoch Times and Zachary Stieber. Trump said he spoke with Senator-elect Tuberville, who has made a challenge to electoral votes. President Donald Trump has spoken to Senator-elect Tommy Tuberville, Republican Alabama, after Tuberville said he was mulling whether to join representatives next month in filing a challenge to electoral votes. I spoke to a great gentleman, Tommy Tuberville, last night, and he was so excited. He said, "You made me the popular politician in the United States." He said, "I can't believe it. He's great, great senator," Trump said on WABC radio. Tuberville, who unseated Senator Doug Jones, Democrat of Alabama, suggested earlier this month that he would challenge electoral votes when a joint session of Congress meets on January 6, 2021 to count them. Now, a challenge must have the backing of at least one member of the House and one senator to trigger a debate and votes by each chamber. Tuberville told an Alabama outlet on Thursday that after the video emerged that he's quote unquote doing my due diligence through the Christmas holiday. "I want to do what's best for President Trump and the people of Alabama and the people of this country." They asked me, "Are you going to support President Trump?" And of course, I'm always going to support President Trump. He's the best president of my lifetime, and he has done more for the people of this country and the state of Alabama than anybody. But we want to make sure we do the right thing, he said. Tuberville said he will probably meet with Representative Mo Brooks, Republican in Alabama, the first person who will be in the House next month committed to challenging votes. Brooks said on C-SPAN's Washington Journal that he plans on challenging votes from states like Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Wisconsin, where the count is in question because of irregularities and possible fraud. The election systems are so flawed so as to render results untrustworthy, he said. The group of members and members-elect who plan to challenge has gotten bigger. Representative Matt Gaetz, Republican Florida, a staunch Trump ally, joined it on Friday. "I'm joining with the fighters in the Congress, and we are going to object to electors from the states that didn't run clean elections," Gaetz told a crowd in Florida. Now on the Senate side, Senators Kelly Loeffler, Republican Georgia, Josh Hawley, Republican Missouri, Rick Scott, Republican Florida, and Rand Paul, Republican Kentucky, have said they aren't ruling it out. Their number is smaller than the senators who have ruled it out, including Senators John Thune, Republican South Dakota, Roy Blunt, Republican Missouri, and Lindsey Graham, Republican South Carolina. Democrat presidential nominee Joe Biden has declared victory in the Senate in the election while Trump is contesting results in key states. The Epoch Times is not calling the race at this time. Trump recently urged more Republican senators to follow Tuberville's lead. "We had a landslide victory and it was smuggled away from the Republican Party, but we caught them. Do something," Trump said. "We won the presidential election by a lot. Fight for it. Don't let them take it away." And yeah, so as Electoral mentioned, it takes one congressman and one senator to challenge an electoral vote count. It'll be interesting to see. Then they go to their respective chambers and debate. I think I had read somewhere that it was 2 hours for a debate on it, and then it takes a majority in both houses to throw that electoral vote count out. Now, keep in mind, the Democrats hold a slim majority in the in the House of Representatives. I think it's something like 220 or 220 to 215 or something like that. I'll have to look it up, but anyway, if at least 3 senators vote against it, or 3 congressmen vote against it, then if three representatives vote against the electoral vote count, and then it'll be rather interesting to see what happens. And there's this from the Federalist. In deciding the 2020 election, Congress will get the last word. The Senate and House will meet in a joint session on January 6th, a day the Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg labeled a day of quote-unquote ultimate significance in our electoral process to count the recently cast electoral votes. What happens that day will determine the outcome of the presidential election. The procedure. The Electoral Count Act provides that after the electors in each state and the District of Columbia vote on December 14, they must sign a certificate of their votes that is then sealed and sent to the President of the Senate, the Vice President. At 1 p.m. on January 6, a joint session of Congress convenes, at which the presiding officer opens the state certificates in alphabetical order. Each certificate is then presented to quote-unquote tellers who read the votes aloud, after which the presiding officer writes objections. Under the law, objections must be presented in writing and signed by at least one senator and one representative. If a properly made objection is received, the separate houses retreat to their respective chambers for 2 hours of debate and a vote on whether to count the votes in question. The chambers must vote separately on each objection. If a majority in each supports the objection, then the votes in question are excluded. However, if the objection gathers the support of less than a majority in either chamber, it fails and the challenge votes are counted. Legal basis for objections. The Electoral Count Act specifies that objections may be brought if an elector's appointment was not lawfully certified by that state's elector, or that state's governor, rather. Here, violations of equal protection in the Constitution's Electors Clause, along with repeated instances of documented fraud, undermining the integrity of the elections in multiple swing states, that ultimately declared former Vice President Joe Biden the winner, despite early commanding leads by President Donald Trump. And because those final tallies were polluted by illegitimate votes, the electors pledged to Biden were not legally appointed and therefore were not lawfully certified. Republicans in the House and Senate should raise these objections. Historical precedent. While objections to electoral votes are infrequent, they are not unprecedented. On prior occasions where the objections were made, Democrats lodged them. In 1877, Democrats challenged the entire electoral delegations from Florida, Louisiana, South Carolina, Vermont, and Wisconsin, whose votes were won by Republican Rutherford B. Hayes. In 1969, Senator Edward Muskie of Maine and Representative James O'Hara of Michigan, both Democrats, objected to counting the vote of a faithless elector from North Carolina. In 2001, members of the Congressional Black Caucus, also all Democrats, attempted to block Florida's electoral votes, which had gone to Republican George W. Bush from being counted, claiming overwhelming evidence of official misconduct and deliberate fraud. 4 years later, after election results indicated Bush had won re-election against Democratic challenger John Kerry, Senator Barbara Boxer and Representative Stephanie Tubbs Jones, both Democrats, objected to Ohio's electoral votes, which Bush had won, claiming widespread irregularities. Most recently, at the 2017 joint session after the Trump Clinton election contest. Several Democrat House members challenged the results, claiming a widespread violation of the law. What to expect? While the joint session has historically been a mere formality, this year is different. Already, Alabama Representative Mo Burke says that he will object to the electoral votes from swing states where the elections were contaminated by unconstitutional conduct and fraud. Representative Matt Gaetz is also considering objecting. We can expect others, such as Representative Mike Kelly from Pennsylvania, who is a plaintiff in one of the election lawsuits before the Supreme Court, to join as well. Members, to avoid being gabbled down, a senator must join their objections. While no one from the upper chamber has yet stepped up, it's possible someone will, especially 2014 presidential aspirants looking to raise their national profile and carry favor with Trump's loyalists. Josh Hawley of Missouri, Ted Cruz of Texas, and Rand Paul of Kentucky have expressed openness to the idea. Now keep in mind that this article was written before the Epoch Times article, so that's why you had Senator-elect Tuberville also considering a challenge to the electoral votes. Now, the real challenge, of course, will be getting a majority of both houses to support the objections. Although Democrats are in the majority in the House, it's the slimmest one in 2 decades. In the Senate, it comes down to Georgia. If either Kelly Loeffler or David Perdue are reelected, the GOP will retain its control of that chamber. Those runoffs will take place January 5th, the day before the joint session. It is therefore imperative that these Republicans must be reelected by decisive margins. So the outcome of those elections, and therefore the partisan division of the Senate, is not in question at the time the Senate must vote on objections. Importantly, congressional decisions to strike electors' votes are immune from court review. According to John Tyler Morgan, a Democrat senator in the Congress that passed the Electoral Count Act in 1887, Congress not only has the power to vote down the voice of the state's electors, but once they do, the power to revoke that decision passes beyond human control. If enough electoral votes are eliminated to prevent either candidate from obtaining a majority, the quote-unquote contingent election provision of the 12th Amendment would kick in, leaving the House of Representatives to choose a president, something that has occurred just once before in 1825. Each state delegation would get 1 vote, and as Republicans control 26 of the 50 state delegations, such a scenario would likely result in Trump's re-election. And in Federalist 68, Alexander Hamilton urged us to place every practicable article against cabal and corruption, which are the most deadly adversaries of Republican government. On January 6, Congress can do so. It can strike the electoral votes from states where the contests were irredeemably compromised by fraud, illegal voting, and unconstitutionality. And I know I'm definitely looking forward to that, and I would imagine many others are as well, and also that it might be broadcast on ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, and other places. So be interesting to see what happens along those lines. Now, in other news, we have evidence that there was Hunter Biden evidence which was suppressed by the media and Silicon Valley allies by the Democrats. This coming from the Washington Times, and it says Hunter Biden evidence suppressed by the media and Silicon Valley allies. Democrats, along with allies in Silicon Valley and the news media, have suppressed the Hunter Biden scandal despite mounting evidence that President-elect Joseph R. Biden's son had secret, lucrative financial ties to oligarchs and a powerful, communist-connected Chinese businessman. Since September, it has been a remarkable combination of blacklisting, promoting the theory of a Russian plot against the Bidens, or simply ignoring the story. Liberal news websites acknowledged the scandal only after Mr. Biden won the election, and Hunter Biden publicly stated that he is under criminal investigation for suspected tax fraud. The difference is striking for President Trump's associates, who media excoriated during the long FBI Russia probe, which did not establish a conspiracy in the 2016 election. It was an unprecedented cover-up across so many entities inside and outside of the government, J.D. Gordon, the 2016 Trump campaign's national security advisor, told the Washington Times. Silicon Valley suppressed an actual scandal related to Hunter Biden while hyping a manufactured scandal over Trump-Russia. Mr. Gordon, now an analyst for One America News, was dogged by the news media and the special counsel's office over how he handled a proposed amendment to the Republican Party platform on arming the Ukrainian military. Investigators found no wrongdoing. News of Hunter Biden's extensive cash flow from shady foreigners was documented in the September 23rd report by Senate Republicans. It revealed a series of Treasury Department suspicious activity reports on Hunter Biden from Europe to Asia. The pre-election report by Senate Finance Committee Chairman Charles A. Grassley, Iowa Republican, and Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee Chairman Ron Johnson, Wisconsin Republican, received coverage from conservative media. From the dominant liberal press, there was a blackout. We found that the Bidens engaged in potential criminal financial deals across the globe, including China, which created counterintelligence concerns, Mr. Grassley said on the Senate floor. I think it's outrageous that the Fourth Estate would choose to ignore facts when they are uncovered by Republicans. Committee Democrats responded to the report, which relied on official bank wire transfers, by accusing Mr. Johnson of accepting Russian disinformation. Democrats had leaked the conspiracy beforehand at liberal news outlets. The Democrats claimed that Mr. Johnson's staff communicated with the Ukrainian politician and known Russian puppet. Mr. Johnson called that a lie. Democrats laundered their unclassified speculation through classified analysis of intelligence, reporting to fabricate a veneer of credibility in an effort to shield their claims from public scrutiny. Those false claims were then leaked to friendly media outlets, which reported them as fact, Mr. Johnson and Mr. Grassley said. In October, the New York Post revealed the stunning document with contents of Hunter Biden's abandoned MacBook Pro laptop. The hard drive showed the son's global financial dealings, including message traffic about including Joseph Biden in the deals. At least one Ukrainian oligarch representative who financed Hunter Biden received a private audience from his father, who was vice president at the time. How did the Democrat Silicon Valley news media triumvirate react? Well, they played the Russia card. After the New York Post story appeared, Democrat aligned former intelligence officers, led by the appointees of President Obama, alleged that the laptop was an elaborate Russian plot. Weeks after Mr. Biden won the presidency, no proof of a Moscow laptop link has emerged. But an open letter, led by former CIA Director John O'Brien and former Director of National Intelligence James R. Clapper, provided a talking point that news media needed to condemn the laptop reporting instead of following it up. Cable channels CNN and MSNBC launched a cacophony of Russian plot talking points to try to suppress the story. Twitter went a step further. It blacklisted the New York Post story altogether from its 6,000 tweets a second platform. Gatekeepers claimed the messages were the result of a hack. Even though there was no such evidence, Facebook limited the article's distribution. Jason Maloney, a public relations executive who worked as a spokesman for former Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort, told the New York Times that he is surprised the media ignored what Hunter Biden did during his father's vice presidency. Manafort, hounded relentlessly by the press and congressional Democrats, was convicted of tax fraud but not a Russian conspiracy. I am surprised and saddened about how incurious some are about some truly concerning and verifiable facts, Mr. Maloney told the Washington Times. Every single day, stories emerge where there is a need for no agenda investigative journalism. Apolitical platforms and lawmakers with zero interest in scoring political points to help us understand how large the iceberg is beneath the surface. When did we become so afraid of a narrative that it doesn't quite fit our neat little worldview? David Harsani wrote in National Review, Journalists claim they can't cover the New York Post Hunter Biden email scoop because the underlying evidence is yet to be verified. Also, they won't look for any verifying evidence because there isn't enough evidence. That's quite the conundrum. And ironically, it was Democrats, led by Representative Adam B. Schiff of California, and their penchant for accusing detractors of being Russian assets that prompted her former Hunter Biden business partner, Tony Bobulinski, to come forward on Fox News. He verified the message's authenticity. Liberal media still shunned the story. Mr. Harsanyi wrote, perhaps my favorite part of yesterday's interview, though, was learning that Adam Schiff's ugly and mendacious habit of smearing anyone he disagrees with as a Russian asset is what allegedly helped spur Bobulinski, a former U.S. Navy lieutenant, to come forward. The laptop launch point was a computer repair shop in Wilmington, Delaware. The owner said Hunter Biden dropped it off for repairs in April 2019 and never returned. The owner eventually provided the contents to the FBI and to Trump attorney Rudolph W. Giuliani. Together, the laptop and the Senate report show the profile of a son cashing in on his father's federal office. Millions of dollars in investments and consulting fees flowed to him from a Moscow oligarch close to Russian President Vladimir Putin in 2014, a Ukrainian energy firm deemed corrupt by the U.S. government, and a fantastically wealthy Chinese corporate figure working with the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Liberation Army. That businessman, Yi Jianming, whose firm directly wired millions of dollars to Hunter Biden, was accused of corruption in 2018 and disappeared. At one point, Yi Associates financed a $100,000 shopping spree by Hunter Biden and his uncle James Biden. The Senate report showed Hunter Biden also provided thousands of dollars to European women involved in human trafficking. The conservative watchdog Media Research Center commissioned a poll by Russian pollster McLaughlin and Associates. It showed that 36% of Biden voters were not aware of Hunter Biden's scandal, and that 13% of those said they would not have voted for the former vice president if they had known. Big media and big tech stole the 2020 election, the Media Research Center said. Also said Mr. Gordon, the former campaign advisor, for all the attention on foreign election interference, public censorship by domestic groups like Twitter and Facebook was more impactful in shaping the outcome. Big tech is rapidly becoming Big Brother straight out of Orwell's 1984. Its unholy alliance with the federal bureaucracy and elected Democrats poses one of the biggest internal threats facing America today. Our freedom is in free fall. And one interesting thing in that article that I had found is the fact that, you know, it was the media who had basically just ignored it, poo-pooed it, shoved it under the rug. And right now, speaking of media, we have Fox News just going out, you know, Fox News actually losing conservatives and Republicans. Got this from my good friends over at Red State. This is by Jeff Charles. Are we witnessing the beginning of the end for Fox News? What's going to happen to Fox News? After the election, it seems that conservatives and Republicans are gradually looking elsewhere for their news and commentary. But it isn't just right-leaning consumers of content that are pivoting. The individuals who appear on these networks seem to be noticing the shift. The Hill recently reported that GOP lawmakers are appearing more frequently on Newsmax than they have in the past. Indeed, Fox News was virtually the only conservative news outlet on which Republican leaders appeared up until recently. As President Trump openly fused with Fox News, conservative lawmakers and loyal Trump officials have increasingly given Newsmax added Newsmax to their rotation of media stops, giving a sheen of credibility to the fledgling network as it seeks to compete for conservative viewers, according to The Hill. Newsmax is not yet rivaling Fox in terms of ratings, but it seems feasible that the outlet could close the gap in the next few years. GOP lawmakers told The Hill that the rise in popularity for Newsmax and other right-leaning news organizations have enticed them to appear more frequently on these alternative networks. Representative Andy Harris, Republican Maryland, stated that Trump's feud with Fox contributed to his decision to look at smaller outlets. The Hill noted, asked whether Trump's criticism of Fox News is effective for the small segment of Republicans considering the alternative networks, Harris replied, it is for me. The same seems to hold true for other GOP lawmakers. Newsmax anchor Sean Spicer and his co-host Lindsay Keith recently interviewed newly elected representatives August Pfluger and Tony Gonzalez. Representative Jim Banks, a Republican Indiana, still appears on Fox, but has also made multiple appearances on Spicer's show. Sean Spicer is well respected on Capitol Hill, and his show with Lindsay is both substantive and widely viewed in Congress, Banks told The Hill. I enjoy doing it and get feedback from constituents when I do. From The Hill, over one 24-hour period last week, Newsmax featured new interviews with Senators Marsha Blackburn, Republican Tennessee, Rand Paul, Republican Kentucky, and David Perdue, Republican Georgia. Representative Jody Hice, Republican Georgia, stopped by to attack elected Republican officials in Georgia for not doing enough to root out fraud. Representative Chuck Fleischman, Republican Tennessee, hammered Representative Eric Swalwell, Democrat California, for his office having been infiltrated by a Chinese spy, and Representative Andy Biggs, Republican Arizona, came on to blame Democrats for stalling COVID-19 relief efforts. Other Republican politicians have not yet appeared on Newsmax, but they seem to be taking notice of the trend. I know back home people are watching Fox less than watching the other outlets, a GOP lawmaker in the Midwest told The Hill. Still, Fox News remains the dominant right-leaning news outlet. It is a top-ranked network in both daytime and primetime. Still, Fox can book anyone it wants, including Trump, who sat for an interview with Fox and Friends last week, despite his criticism of the network. Its popularity is declining in the wake of the election, but it still has a ways to go before it has to worry about competition from the likes of Newsmax and One American News Network. But this does not mean it can afford to rest on its laurels. Newsmax seems to be doing everything it can to capitalize on conservatives' dissatisfaction with Fox. Reuters reported that the network plans to hire more staff in the United States and London, debut a new primetime host, and add more weekend programming to capitalize on post-election gains and some viewers' discontent with Rupert Murdoch's longtime rating King Fox News. Now, Axios noted that Newsmax is making a push to snag some of Fox News' talent. They reported that the company is trying to lure away its vital booking agents with promises of higher salaries. Fox News might be the outlet of choice for most conservatives currently, but it is entirely possible that this is changing. The network's handling of the election left a sour taste in many Republicans' mouths, and it is no surprise that they are seeking out other news sources. While it is likely that the outlet will fold completely, or while it is unlikely that the outlet will fold completely, it appears to be inevitable that its competitors will grow more popular and could pose a serious challenge to the network's dominance. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and let me know as well here. Comment below what do you think of Fox News? Do you watch it? What do you think will happen with Newsmax and OANN? I mean, I know I watch it. I know I've been watching some One American News Network as well, and it'll be very interesting and intriguing to see what happens. Like I said, let me know in the comments section what you think about that. Also, tell me what you think about the Republicans challenging the electoral vote count in Congress on January 6th. And I'll see you in the next one. Lawyer Sidney Powell had brought up the the Kraken many times. It hasn't released the Kraken, and during the during the recounts and everything, so she may just get to prove that in court after all. Got this from William A. Jacobson over at the Legal Insurrection. Sidney Powell may get to try to prove a Kraken case as a defendant in civil lawsuits by Smartmatic and Dominion. Smartmatic and Dominion have demanded retractions and threatened suit, but Sidney Powell isn't backing down, and her attorney, Lynn Wood, dares them fire your lawsuit. There have been several post-election developments in the last few days. First, the Trump campaign has filed a petition for writ of certiorari and related motion for expedited consideration with the U.S. Supreme Court. The petition asks voters to overturn Pennsylvania Supreme Court decisions regarding election procedure. The case can change the outcome of the election because even without Pennsylvania, Biden would still have enough sufficient Electoral College votes to win. It's hard to say what SCOTUS will do because many of the procedural problems of prior suits are absent, but it's also coming up on the January 6th congressional acceptance of the electors. Now, I don't know why this wasn't brought up weeks ago. Second, the Trump campaign and some Republicans plan to contest the electors from contested swing states in Congress on January 6th. That appears to be the endgame, but as explained before, that has zero chance of success in the House because state-certified electors are accepted unless a challenge is sustained, and the government in a Democrat-controlled House is not going to uphold a challenge to Biden electors. A lot of people are arguing that being seen to keep fighting is most important, even if a congressional challenge has no chance of succeeding. Now, I'm all in favor of fighting, including against the congressional Republicans ready to play footsie with Biden, but it's important to fight smart. By the time of Trump's inauguration, #the resistance was already highly organized, stretching to the top of the FBI with all of the lawyers and protesters and writers and single quote-unquote community organizing groups lined up and ready to go. They hit the ground running, ready to kill the Trump presidency in the crib, so to speak. We won't be in that position if the Biden presidency, or as to the Biden presidency at this pace. Third, and the main point of this post, is that Sidney Powell may get her day in court as to her allegations against Dominion and Smartmatic. As you recall, she has advanced a theory of foreign and possible U.S. intelligence service manipulation of those voting and software systems to rig the election. Now, she's never offered any proof of that, and the mere possibility that it might have happened or it could happen is not proof that it did happen. We've emphasized that problem since the start. The quote-unquote Kraken, as it was called, served as an unprovable distraction from other more specific claims of fraud. Now, Smartmatic and Dominion are demanding retractions, not only from Powell, but also from conservative media who allegedly advance similar claims. Reportedly, some of the networks are running segments disavowing the accusations, such as this as Newsmax. John Whitehouse tweeted out, Newsmax just there this note to clarify its coverage of Smartmatic and Dominion. Lynn Wood, the second half of the Kraken team, is representing Powell and daring the firms to file suit. Lynn Wood tweeted out on Sunday, knowing my background and experience in defamation law, Sidney Powell asked me to represent her and respond to Smartmatic litigation threat. Since everything Sidney is saying about election fraud is documented truth, my response to Smartmatic was simple and to the point. And there's a picture of that in the tweet. I've said many times that if she had a normal litigation schedule and discovery opportunity, maybe Powell could prove her Kraken case, but that the electoral timetable didn't allow years of litigation. Powell now may get a chance to try to prove her case as a defendant in civil lawsuits. Fourth, there are reports, which must be taken with the usual grain of salt, that Powell has been meeting with Trump at the White House, jawboning him to declare martial law to seize voting machines. Trump denies it. Martial law equals fake news. That's more knowingly bad reporting, the president tweeted out on Sunday. But it's of interest that Rudy Giuliani, again, is distancing Trump and the legal team from Powell. John Santucci tweeted out, Rudy Giuliani on Newsmax has separated himself, legal team, and Trump from Sidney Powell. Despite Powell back at the White House today, third time in days, she does not speak for the president. Now that's where we seem to have less than a month from the inauguration and just over 2 weeks away from the joint session of Congress to confirm the electoral vote count. And the GOP is challenging it. How, you may ask? Well, there's this from Town Hall and Beth Bauman, how the GOP plans to challenge the election results. President Donald Trump on Monday met with a handful of Republican members of Congress about how to move forward with challenging the results of the 2020 presidential election. White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows tweeted after the meeting saying the group is preparing to fight back against mounting evidence of voter fraud. According to Politico's Jake Sherman, multiple Republicans from the House were seen at the White House. Fox News' Chad Pilgrim confirmed that Republican Congressman Mo Brooks of Alabama, Matt Gaetz from Florida, and Louis Gohmert of Texas were at the Oval Office. Now, it's no surprise that Gaetz, one of President Trump's closest allies in Congress, was in attendance. He told Turning Point USA's Student Action Summit that he planned to contest the election results. I'm good with the fighters in the Congress, and we are going to object to electors from states that didn't run clean elections, Gaetz said, and Newsweek reported. Our friends in the media will breathlessly exclaim that we are attacking democracy. That's nonsense, he told the crowd. Democracy is left undefended if we accept the result of a stolen election without fighting with every bit of vigor we can muster. Congressman Paul Gosar of Arizona also confirmed he was in attendance. The goal of the meeting was to prepare for the possibility of overturning the Electoral College's decision to name former Vice President Joe Biden and Senator Kamala Harris, Democrat California, as the president-elect and vice president-elect. According to Representative Mo Brooks, Republican Alabama, a number of Republican legislators have questions about voting irregularities that took place. I believe we have multiple senators, and the question is not if, but how many, Brooks told CNN. One of Brooks' goals is to challenge election results in a minimum of 6 battleground states, although there is a potential for more. He's hoping to get 72 lawmakers between both chambers to make 5-minute speeches, something he dubs as a significant task. Representative Louis Gohmert, Republican of Texas, said he didn't need convincing. He was planning to challenge the election's results. Representative-elect Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican Georgia, stated she would lead the Georgia delegation in challenging the results. Now, it's important to note that Brooks' effort to lead the fight are rooted in personal experience. When he first ran for the Alabama House in 1982, 11 of the 45 voting machines that were used were allegedly rigged for Democrats, the Washington Examiner reported. Poll workers spotted the mistake and allowed Brooks supporters to tally their votes on a sheet of paper on the wall. He ended up coming out of the race victorious with 57% of the vote. Based on his personal experience and what he's seen, he fully believes that presidential results are wrong, and no one knows just how wrong things actually are. Brooks believes Trump's path to victory is no longer in the courts, but rather in the House of Representatives. As the House moves to certify the election results, they must go state by state. All it takes is one representative and one senator to object to that state's results. The congressman says those states that are called into question should be thrown out. If that happens in enough battleground states, then neither Trump nor Biden would hit the 270 electoral votes to win the Electoral College. That would mean the House would pick the president. Under the Constitution, according to Brooks, should the House have to pick the president, each state gets just one vote. That one vote is based on what party controls the state house. The GOP runs 26 state houses, meaning the Republicans pick who will be the next president. House Republicans control the election of the next president of the United States, Brooks explained to the Examiner. There's a legal question about whether each state delegation will get one vote, or if each member gets a vote, which could dramatically change the outcome. The Constitution says that in the election of the president by the House, you vote by state delegation. So the legal fight, will be whether the same standard applies to this part of the election of the president. So I'm sure the Democrats will argue that it's a majority of the 435 that make the determination, Brooks explained. The Republicans would be wise to argue that there were 50 votes won by each state, and that makes the determination. How that'll happen, I don't know, Brooks said. Now, it's unclear what senators will be up for the challenge of challenging the election results. Alabama Senator-elect Tommy Tuberville said he was contemplating being that one person. Sam Stein tweeted out, Trump says he spoke to Tommy Tuberville last night. Tuberville said he'd vote against codifying the Electoral College results. Now, what will take place on January 6th is anyone's guess, but buckle up, it's going to be a bumpy ride. And that is so true. It'll be a very, very bumpy ride. And, it's just, I mean, it'll be very intriguing to see just what happens and what comes out of all this. But there. I mean, those who have signed on to oppose President Trump may have committed the greatest political blunder in American history, according to Steve McCann over at the American Thinker, where if courts and state legislatures award Joe Biden the presidency, the anti-Trump cabal, driven by a 4-year single-minded obsession to defeat President Trump, will have committed the greatest political blunder in American history, the unabashed and overt theft of the 2020 presidential election. This myopic and oblivious group so misunderstood the depth and breadth of support for Donald Trump that the blatant manipulation of the election would fall monumentally short of the plan and for an anticipated landslide defeat of the incumbent, a landslide they needed in order to dominate the political arena for the foreseeable future and avoid any backlash from the electorate for their duplicity. Thus, this cabal, which consists of the Democrat Party establishment, tech and Wall Street billionaires, the mainstream media and left-wing elitists, will find itself in a quagmire of being unable to govern. The Democrat Party's dominant and radicalized left-wing base will revolt over failed promises and expectations, while the extent of the fraud will inevitably be fully exposed, resulting in nearly half of the citizenry viewing the government as illegitimate. The unleashing of COVID-19 on the world by the Chinese communists opened the door for massive voter fraud, primarily via mail-in ballots, to be introduced into traditional battleground states. Operating on the 4-year premise that the destruction of President Trump justifies any means, the Democrat Party establishment extra-constitutionally imposed changes to election laws in a number of states. At the same time, their cadre of co-conspirators were also mobilized. The social media oligarchs and the mainstream media controlled and blatantly censored the flow of information. The South-style progressive billionaires, in violation of campaign laws, poured untold millions into so-called get-out-the-vote campaigns, and the left-wing elites mobilized their army of foot soldiers to intimidate state and local politicians, as well as state and federal judges, in addition to being frontline participants in various statewide voter frauds. These conspirators smugly believed that they had successfully set up a scenario wherein Donald Trump would be defeated in such a massive landslide that the vast majority of the citizenry would never question the results. Further, Donald Trump would be so marginalized that his future as the leader of a growing political movement would be rendered moot as he slunk tail between his legs back to Mar-a-Lago, thus leaving the political playing field in the hands of the established ruling class in near perpetuity. Instead, the worst-case scenario played out. The election came down to 4 battleground states, Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, and Pennsylvania, with a total margin for Joe Biden of 120,000 out of 18,600,000 legally or illegally cast votes, or 0.6%. The question of fraud, despite the cowardice of the federal and state judiciaries, cannot be swept under the rug, particularly as so many illegalities have already been exposed. Further, nearly half of all likely voters, 75% of Republicans and 30% of Democrats, believe there was sufficient fraud in the election to ensure Biden won. Despite the best efforts of both social and mainstream media, as well as the Democrat Party hierarchy, that perception will never dramatically change, as in a recent poll, just 56% of Americans say Biden is their president. Once in office, both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would be viewed as by a significant plurality of Americans as transparent frauds and imposters thanks to an unabashedly fraudulent campaign. A citizenry already consumed with contempt for the ruling class due to their ham-handed police state tactics in dealing with the Chinese coronavirus is now waking up to their duplicity and megalomania. Without the modicum of a mandate and open hostility towards a Biden-Harris administration, there is very little the ruling class can do to enact their agenda with the specter of revenge in the 2022 midterms hanging over their heads. However, there is a more pressing issue that will impact the nation. The left-wing base of the Democrat Party can rightfully claim that it was their grassroots effort that had pushed the Biden-Harris ticket over the top. Now, had there been the landslide all had anticipated and planned for, then the left would have had no choice but to be satisfied with the crumbs from the executive table, as their role in the election fraud would be downplayed. But there will be no crumbs from the table, as many of the grandiose plans of the ruling class will have to be shelved. This will not sit well with the rank and file left-wing radicals, as they will realize they were mere pawns in the lawless seizure of power by their nemesis. The billionaire class, the corporatists, and the ruling elites, and their collective self-interest runs counter to the Marxist socialist ideology of the left. None of these promises made during the campaign season will be kept, as these doctrinaire socialists and their leaders will be shunted to the side while their erstwhile allies focus on maintaining their stranglehold on the levers of power in the face of an aroused and determined opposition led by Donald Trump. In the spring and summer of 2020, the ruling class, in a marriage of convenience, tacitly aligned themselves with another anti-Trump faction, the left's uncontrollable militant militias, Antifa and Black Lives Matter. By their collective silence and capitulation in the face of ongoing riots, violence, intimidation, and looting, they convey to these self-styled revolutionaries that they are spineless and easily intimidated. Now, when the radical left is ignored and marginalized by a Biden-Harris administration, and the frustration level reaches a boiling point, then these militants will again take to the streets in an even more violent manner. The bitter harvest of a massive election fraud will be a government beset with an inability to govern, as it will have no goodwill with the bulk of the American people and a political base it cannot placate. The perpetrators of this fraud are predestined to fail, as well as hasten the ultimate demise of the Democrat Party. The only issue outstanding is whether this nation will descend into chaos and bitterness as a result. It's true, and I mean, we're actually seeing some of that already, and as a matter of fact, I mean, okay, I think this is a prime case in point. Yesterday, the Congress had called for $600 per I think per person in COVID relief, and Democrat Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii, who is leaving at the end, who is leaving when the new Congress gets sworn in, called it an insult and a slap to the face to struggling Americans. This by David Bansky over at The Blaze. Democrat U.S. Representative Tulsi Gabbard told her Twitter followers that $600 in COVID-19 relief coming to Americans as part of a massive spending bill passed by the House and Senate Monday is an insult and a slap in the face to everyone struggling financially due to pandemic shutdowns since the spring. What are the details? Gabbard, who's become a favorite among conservatives for her no-nonsense approach and sheer views on crucial issues, posted a video saying she voted against the spending bill. First of all, this bill was over 5,500 pages long, she began. We received the text of this bill at approximately 2:30 this afternoon, and we're told we have to go and vote on it just a few hours later. There is no way that anybody in Congress had the opportunity or the time to go through and read this bill to know exactly what was in it. I've been here long enough to see how provisions are snuck into these bills literally in the dark of night, without any announcement, without telling anyone what's in it, and then rush through in the manner that we have seen tonight. Gabbard added that such actions are the height of irresponsibility that prevented elected officials from being able to adequately represent the interests of Americans. She also emphasized that the central part of this bill was supposed to be about providing direct COVID relief to the American people who are struggling and who need help the most, but instead Gabbard said the bill dished out hundreds of billions of dollars to special interests, the military, and foreign countries while telling average Americans, here's what's left for you. You get $600. I'll tell you in Hawaii that in most cases won't even cover 25% of your rent, she explained. It is an insult and a slap in the face to every single American in this country who is struggling because of this COVID pandemic, who is concerned about not being able to pay the rent, about eviction, about whether you'll have enough to buy groceries and medicine for yourself or your loved ones. Gabbard concluded by calling the bill a representation of the screwed up priorities of Washington. They should be fighting for you and making sure that you, the American people, come first. This bill did not do that. And you can see the tweet that Gabbard had put out there saying that we deserve better. Anything else? Gabbard also made headlines this week for holding off on receiving the COVID-19 vaccine being given to her congressional colleagues, saying she'll wait until elderly Americans are able to receive the shot. And last week, she introduced two pro-life bills in the House of Representatives, one to protect babies who survive abortions, and another to protect pain-capable unborn children from abortion. Gabbard, who is retiring from Congress at the end of her term, also introduced a bill banning males from competing in women's sports if they identify as transgender, as well as another with President Thomas Massie, Republican Kentucky, that would repeal the Patriot Act. I mean, it's good that somebody is standing up, and I mean, she is a Democrat, yes, but she is a pragmatic Democrat. She's not one who is swinging hard left or I would say that she's one of the more centrist leftists, if there is such a thing nowadays. But yeah, she might be someone to keep an eye on. Let me know in the comments what you think about that, as well as what you think about any of the other articles that I had talked about today. And I'll see you in the next one. Over a month past the election, and there's still lawsuits set out there. As a matter of fact, there is one project saying that state legislators need to certify their presidential electors. This coming from the Epoch Times, and it says, Amistad project says state legislators, not the executive, need to certify presidential electors. A group has brought a lawsuit on Tuesday seeking to block the counting of electoral college votes from several contested states when Congress meets in a joint session on January 6. The Amistad Project filed the lawsuit arguing that the state legislatures of Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona were prevented from exercising their power under the U.S. Constitution to certify the presidential electors' votes cast on December 14th. Their group claims that a number of federal and state laws had unconstitutionally delegated the authority of the state legislatures to certify these votes to state executive branches. Under Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, presidential electors must be appointed by each state in the manner prescribed by the state legislature. The group argues that the provision prevents state legislatures delegating their power to state executive branch officials as a ministerial duty. There are textual and structural arguments for these state statutes being unconstitutional, the group wrote in their lawsuit. They argue that the state laws are an unconstitutional delegation of the state legislative prerogatives and post-election certifications of presidential votes and of presidential electors. The lawsuit also argues that state legislatures, many of which are adjourned until January 2021, are also prevented to perform their post-election certification duty. In order to conduct a special legislative session, a supermajority or a governor must agree that legislatures should meet. However, the group said that the governors from these states are preventing the state legislatures from doing so. The very body that is responsible for how these electors are selected can't even meet after the election, up through January, so that's unconstitutional. In fact, it's a delegation of authority to a power of a legislative function. That is not allowed. Phil Klein, director of the Amistad Project, told the Epoch Times' American Thought Leaders. He added that state officials of some blue states have also been hostile to state legislators. He said the Michigan Attorney General, Dana Nessel, had considered criminal investigations and prosecutions for legislators who didn't agree with her on the election result. Now that's stunning to me. That type of intimidation and threat should never happen in America from the state or chief law enforcement officer. Klein, who was a former attorney general in Kansas, said, the defendants in the lawsuit included Vice President Mike Pence, Congress, and officials from the 5 battleground states. It was filed on behalf of voter rights organizations and voters from the 5 states. The lawsuit seeks to declare sections of federal and state laws that delegate the post-election certification power to state executives as unconstitutional. It also asked the court to prevent Pence, who will be counting the Electoral College votes, and Congress from counting votes from Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin until their state legislatures are able to meet to certify the votes. Based on this legal background, plaintiffs claim under the Article 2 that if there is no legislative state post-election certifications of presidential votes and a presidential electors in the defendant states, then those defendant states' presidential electors' votes not so certified cannot be counted by the federal defendants for president and vice president under Article 2, the lawsuit states. The lawsuit comes as Republican lawmakers are weighing whether to launch a challenge to Electoral College votes in contested states on January 6. Several House members have vowed to launch challenges to prevent Congress from counting the state of electoral votes for Democrat nominee Joe Biden in several contested states. Representative Mo Brooks, from Republican Alabama, initiated the push when he announced his intention to object to the electoral votes come January. Since then, a growing number of Republican lawmakers have expressed their intention to object to the electoral votes during that session. So far, there have been no senators who are publicly committed to challenging a state's results. A handful of Republican senators haven't ruled out the possibility of objecting, but have said that they would first monitor the developments regarding claims of voter fraud. Meanwhile, Senator-elect Tommy Tuberville, Republican Alabama, has suggested that he may join the planned objection by members of the House of Representatives. The case is cited as Washington Voters Alliance v. Pence, 1:20-CV-03791. Now, it's interesting that this is coming about, especially given the next article that I'm about to read from the Gateway Pundit, which asks that very question. And I mean, I'm interested in seeing just what will happen. And yes, the state legislatures do have the power under the Constitution, and they also have the power to call for something else, which I'll get to in a later article today. But back to the question. But back to the election and the question: will Vice President Pence tomorrow step in and throw out state electoral college picks that are based on fraudulent results and ask the state legislatures to step in? This from the Gateway Pundit and Joe Hoft. Some experts believe that Vice President Mike Pence has a duty tomorrow to throw out the Electoral College recommendations in the 2020 election that are based on fraud. This will then force these states to have their legislatures choose a set of delegates they believe will best represent the state's election results. Ivan Raiklin has studied the Constitution and found some absolutely fascinating information. He is reporting that a peaceful and constitutionally lawful resolution to the situation we are in is at hand and may begin tomorrow. a tweet from Ivan Raikling yesterday. America, Vice President Mike Pence must do this tomorrow to defend our Constitution from our enemies, foreign, Russia, China, Japan, or China, Russia, Iran, and domestic, big tech censorship, MSM censorship, corrupt officials at the state, federal, or at the federal, state, and local levels. Let them know when there's a picture coming and there's a photo with it. Kraken reports that the Vice President has the power tomorrow to throw out electoral slates from states that are based on fraudulent results. Kraken also tweeted today, emergency, will President Trump pull out the Pence card tomorrow and pull off the biggest political upset in the history of humanity to save the Republican in the world? Hashtag we the people, hashtag digital soldiers, and there's another photo there. Now, if Pence were to act tomorrow, then the election would no longer be confirmed by the governors and secretaries of state and select swing states. It would be in the hands of the legislatures. From this point forward, it would be in the hands of the legislatures. The Georgia Judiciary Committee has already voted and agrees that there is enough information to decertify the vote for Joe Biden. We also know that the Arizona legislature may certify the vote for President Trump tomorrow. Now the question is whether the other states will be forced to do the same, and it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, actually, it's 2 weeks from today that the Congress will meet at 1 p.m. to determine and certify the Electoral College votes. So it should be very interesting. Now, this is another interesting fact is another interesting thing that has come out is this COVID deal that the House and Senate had voted in, and it's on Trump whether to sign it or to veto it. This coming from Fox News, and it's entitled, Trump's call for $2,000 stimulus checks hailed by critics Pelosi, AOC, and Sanders. As if 2020 hasn't delivered enough unexpected news, consider this. President Trump's call Tuesday night for Congress to raise coronavirus stimulus payments to Americans to $2,000 won raves from at least 3 of his harshest critics. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, U.S. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders all favor the president's proposal for $2,000 indirect payments over the $600 that Congress has suggested in its $900 billion plan. Trump made the pitch in a video posted on Twitter in which he slammed the COVID bill as a disgrace and assailed many individual line items in the 5,000-page plan approved by Congress, calling on lawmakers to amend the package, which would require the president's signature to become law. It's called the COVID relief bill, but it has almost nothing to do with COVID, the president noted. And that in a tweet, Trump then listed numerous allocations to foreign countries, $40 million to the Kennedy Center in Washington, and additional millions for research projects, as well as other non-COVID related objectives. The bill also allows stimulus checks for the family members of illegal aliens, allowing them to get up to $1,800 each, the president says. This is far more than the Americans are given. Despite all this wasteful spending and much more, the $900 billion package provides hardworking taxpayers with only $600 each in relief payments, and not enough money is given to small businesses, and in particular, restaurants whose owners have suffered so grievously. The president's critics quickly voiced their support for his point of view. President Trump's call for $2,000 stimulus checks to Americans drew support from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, U.S. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Senator Bernie Sanders. Pelosi retweeted the president's video. Republicans repeatedly refused to say what amount the president wanted for direct checks. the San Francisco Democrat, wrote, "At last, the president has agreed to $2,000. Democrats are ready to bring this to the floor this week by unanimous consent. Let's do it." Ocasio-Cortez added her enthusiastic support. "Let's do it." The New York Democrat concurred. Rashida Tlaib and I already co-wrote the COVID amendment for $2,000 check, so it's ready to go. Glad to see the president is willing to support our legislation. We can pass $2,000 checks this week if the Senate GOP agrees to stand down. Sanders also supported the president's proposal, retweeting Pelosi's message. "That's great," the independent U.S. Senator from Vermont wrote. "I first introduced a bill to provide a $2,000 direct payment with Senator Kamala Harris and Senator Ed Markey 7 months ago. Now, Mr. President, get Mitch McConnell and your Republican friends to stop proposing it, and we can provide working class Americans with $2,000. Let's do it." Among Republicans, Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri has been a vocal supporter of more financial assistance for Americans as they deal with the pandemic, with millions of them having lost their jobs and faced evictions from their homes. President Trump is right. Hawley wrote Tuesday night, "Workers deserve much more than $600, as I have repeatedly said and fought for, and there's absolutely plenty of money to do it. Look at what Congress threw away in corporate giveaways and foreign buyouts. Let's get it done." Now, a couple of interesting tidbits in there. One of which deals with the fact that that there are numerous allocations to foreign countries, along with $40 million for the Kennedy Center in Washington and additional millions for research projects. In my mind, that signifies that, too much power in Washington, D.C. as a whole. There is a way that we can eliminate that, and that is via a convention of states for the purpose of proposing amendments to the current Constitution. It's in Article 5 of the Constitution. I had spoken on it a couple of times, and there's an article from my good friends at the Convention of States entitled, "The Fight Begins Against the Biden Swamp. Convention of States pre-filed in 4 states. The swamp is back with a vengeance, but the American people have leveled the first volley. We are pleased to report that the Convention of States resolution has been pre-filed in 4 states. South Carolina, H3205 was filed by Representative Bill Taylor on December 9th. There are 44 co-sponsors. In Montana, the resolution was filed by Senator Tom McGilvray on December 1st. Bill number not yet available. Virginia, HJ 516 was filed by Delegate Ronnie Campbell on December 3rd. And in Washington State, SJM 8000 was filed by Senator Ann Rivers on December 15. This is just the beginning of the fight in these 4 states, but it's an important first step. We want to thank our amazing volunteers who have been encouraging their legislators to support our resolution, and our amazing sponsors who stepped out and encouraged to file it. In each state, our resolution will soon be assigned to appear before a committee. That's where you come in. Once the resolution gets a committee assignment in your state, reach out to those representatives and encourage them to vote for our resolution. When we pass the committee, it's on to the full chamber. Once the resolution passes both chambers, that state will have officially called for a convention of states. And there's a little bit of a snapshot in the photo. To get involved in your state, sign the petition below. We'll send a copy directly to your state representatives. And here's what the petition reads. Almost everyone knows that our federal government is on a dangerous course. The unsustainable debt combined with crushing regulations on states and businesses is a recipe for disaster. What is less known is that the founders gave state legislatures the power to act as a final check on abuses of power in Washington, D.C. Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution authorizes the state legislatures to call a convention for proposing needed amendments to the Constitution. This process does not require the consent of the federal government in Washington, D.C. I support the Convention of States Project, a national effort to call a convention under Article 5 of the United States Constitution restricted to proposing amendments that will impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, limit its power and jurisdiction, and impose term limits on its officials and members of Congress. I want our state to be one of the necessary 34 states to pass a resolution calling for this kind of Article 5 convention. You can find a copy of the model resolution in the Article 5 Pocket Guide, which explains the process and answers many questions here. And there's a link, http://conventionofstates.com handbook.pdf. I ask that you support the Convention of States project and consider becoming a co-sponsor of the resolution. Please respond to my request by informing the National COS team of your position and sending them any questions you may have. info@conventionofstates.com or call area code 540-441-7227. Thank you so much for your service to the people of our district, respectfully, in your name. Now, one good thing about the Convention of States is the fact that no matter who lives at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, these amendments will be a part of the Constitution, and they will far be in control or in effect, no matter who the president is. Like the resolution said, they want 3 topics. First topic is imposing fiscal restraints on the federal government. That includes balanced budget, forcing the country to live within its means and not spend more than it should. Limit the size and power of the federal government. Get rid of some of the unneeded agencies. Also imposing or rather limiting their strength. And number 3, impose term limits. We see congressmen and senators 40, 50, 60 years. They think of it as a career, and it was not intended to be a career position, but rather switch in and out. I'll get into more on this in 2021, but definitely look into it. Comment below what you think about the Convention of States. Also comment what you think about some of the other articles that I've written, and I'll see you in the next video. Today is Christmas Eve, and I would like to wish one and all a very Merry Christmas, and hopefully things will be a lot better in the new year. We have 7 more days left in 2020, and what I want for Christmas is a better year in 2021. And also continued good health for beloved radio talk show host Rush Limbaugh. There's this article from the Washington Examiner. Rush Limbaugh gives emotional sign-off during pre-Christmas show. By Michael Lee. Conservative radio host Rush Limbaugh signed off his show on a somber note, thanking listeners and saying how much he appreciates them. Limbaugh said he was making an attempt to thank everybody in the audience, all of you, for everything you mean to me. That last call reminds me how much I love all of you, how much I so appreciate everything you've meant to me and my family. You don't have any idea. Limbaugh, who first announced his lung cancer diagnosis in February, told listeners in October that despite some early success fighting the disease, more recent scans show the cancer was going in the wrong direction. Stage 4 is, as they say, terminal, Limbaugh said. As he signed off his show the day before Christmas Eve, Limbaugh said he wasn't sure how much longer he would be able to continue his program. So many people think this program has changed their lives for the better. You have no idea how much you've meant to me and my family, Limbaugh said. That day is going to come, folks, when I'm not going to be able to do this. I don't know when that is. I want to be able to do it for as long as I want to do it, but the day will come where I'm not going to be able to. And I want you to understand that even when the day comes, I'd like to be here. Limbaugh said that in the meantime, he wants to show his listeners how much he appreciates them. Because I have this sense of needing to constantly show my appreciation for all of you, for all that you've done and meant to me, Limbaugh said. So I hope you have I hope you all have a great Christmas, a great New Year, and I hope that the things that are in store for all of us in the coming year are certainly better than what we've endured in 2020. The host concluded by wishing everyone a Merry Christmas and a better 2021. I don't know too many people that have enjoyed 2020. Probably some sickos out there who have, but 2021 has to be better, Limbaugh said. We are going to try and make it that way here at the EIB network. Again, folks, thank you so much. I wish there were a way to say it other than thank you. You're just the best. My family is the best. Thank you. Merry Christmas, everybody. Limbaugh has hosted the Rush Limbaugh Show since 1988, becoming a popular and oftentimes controversial conservative commentator. I started listening to Rush Limbaugh in 1993. And off and on since then, I've not listened to him in a while, just catching some of his links on his website, some of the transcripts, and I'd like to say that I am a valued Rush Limbaugh fan, and I'd like to tell him that thank you for everything you've done for America. And in other news on this Christmas Eve day, there are people in Lebanon who are keen not to break tradition. This coming from the UPI, United Press International. Lebanon eager for Christmas traditions in grim year. The people of Lebanon are keen not to break the tradition of celebrating Christmas despite a catastrophic year that has plunged them into poverty and grief. The glamorous Christmas decorations that once transformed the streets, shops, and facades of the buildings into a magical scene during the holiday season have scarcely appeared. While many families have no heart to celebrate, others decorated their homes with their old Christmas trees and flickering lights in a shy attempt to dismiss an overwhelming feeling of sadness in the country. We don't want to break the tradition, Elias Mitri, a 30-year-old graphic designer, said while having a drink with friends at the Internazionale pub in Beirut's Mar Mikhail Arena, which was devastated by the August 4th explosion of the nearby Beirut port. Like in the past years, the Mitris will organize a Christmas dinner that will be attended by all the members of their extended family, who a day before will undergo COVID-19 tests as a precaution. We want to break the sadness. At least we can try. Otherwise, it'll break us more, Mitchie told UPI. Another normal day. Painful memories of the port explosion that killed more than 200 people and destroyed some 200,000 homes are still vivid. The acute economic crisis and skyrocketing inflation are making things even worse, leaving no room for celebration for many. Gara Aoun, a 46-year-old mother of three, is planning nothing for Christmas. It will be another normal day. I cannot afford to buy anything for my kids. No toys, new clothes, or even a Christmas dinner as we used to do, Aoun told UPI. Her husband's monthly salary of 1.2 million Lebanese pounds, or $140 at the black market rate of 8,500 Libby LL per US dollar, is barely enough to cover necessities. To survive, she stopped paying their apartment's rent and canceled the satellite TV subscription while restricted spending to food, school fees, and more importantly, securing an internet connection so that their children can continue their education online. If I want to prepare a Christmas dinner, it means that we won't be able to eat the whole month, Aoun told UPI. Charities help. In the absence of any government support, charities stepped in to lift the grim mood and assist those most affected. Bait al-Baraka has been helping families in deep financial distress since it established a free supermarket in February 2019, securing food for some 226,000 people in need. It has also offered medical and education support and rehabilitated 3,011 homes and 250 small shops destroyed by the port explosion. For Christmas, Maya Ibrahim Cha, founder and president of Bayat al-Baraka, said her charity decided to bring some life to the devastated, predominantly Christian neighborhood, decorating the streets and alleys with lights while a choir quietly sang Christmas carols. We are trying as much as possible to celebrate, but with decency and dignity because many have lost their loved ones, Ibrahim Cha told UPI. Some 500 of the area's most vulnerable families will come to pick up a full Christmas dinner with a bottle of wine and gifts for their children. Every child will have a laptop, and that is very important to help them with their online education. They lost everything when their homes were destroyed, she said. This is our way to celebrate Christmas this year. Reopen businesses. In the Mary Street, some pubs and restaurants have reopened, luring back a faithful clientele. Many are Lebanese living abroad who return to the country to spend the holidays with their families and show support and solidarity. Fresh lockdowns in France, Germany, and the UK, where they currently live, helped spur them to come back. We spent our best days in this street. It is a strange feeling to see shops still destroyed and others full of life. Serge Angelopoulos, who works in the banking sector in Paris, told UPI. Like Ursula Almayer, a renewable energy engineer working in Germany, he wants to give a boost to the newly reopened restaurants and help revive this damaged area. There is a common feeling of sadness and hopelessness, no Christmas spirit, said Almir, who told her mother not to put up the Christmas tree at home this year as it would have been too much. Beirut's City of Life was another initiative to bring life back to Marmakel and the nearby Jamaiz neighborhoods, which were Beirut's top nightlife attractions before the port blast. Starting December 7, concerts, exhibitions, a Christmas fair, and wine festival were organized, while restaurants, cafes, and hotels offered discounts to reactivate their businesses and make up for the losses they suffered. This means that we are not giving up and we are still hopeful, said Hoda Neme, manager of the International pub. And I mean, it's good that to see life being brought back in Lebanon, and as I said at the top, hopefully a lot more will come about in 2021 as far as that goes. And earlier this week, leaders of 5 Christian congregations across the nation were asked to share the Christmas messages, and by the Deseret News, and this is the article, What Christian Leaders Plan to Say on a Pandemic Christmas by Maya Jaradat. This week, the Deseret News asked leaders of 5 Christian congregations across the country to share the Christmas messages they hope to convey to their members as Americans celebrate and contemplate the religious holiday at the end of an extraordinary year. They see parallels between the historical moment of Christ's birth and our own time. They also say that the lessons of Christmas can be applied to our personal lives and help us grow both as individuals and collectively as a nation. The interviews have been condensed and edited for clarity. The Reverend Curtis Price, First Baptist Church, Salt Lake City, Utah. We are not meeting in person for the first time in the history of this church. 130-something years. We're not having a live candidate service. We're grieving that reality, says the Reverend Price. Via live stream this year, alone in the sanctuary, he will tell his congregation about the crises and struggles we're facing now and the crises and struggles that the Jewish people faced during the Roman occupation of Jewish Palestine, modern-day Israel. Famine was a regular occurrence and the Roman occupation was putting down uprisings. Next to Nazareth, where Jesus would spend his childhood. Such was the darkness Jesus was born into, said the Reverend Price, who adds that he has personally grappled with bouts of anxiety and depression during the pandemic. In the midst of all this mayhem and chaos and crisis and difficulty, God quietly intervenes through a child born in obscurity to a poor family in the middle of nowhere. God's solution was this quiet little boy who goes on to bring light to the world. Jesus' birth and his teachings implore us to have the hope and inspiration and courage and strength to live out what we don't see yet, but the hope for the future. to live in the just kingdom of God that Jesus preached about. When Jesus spoke of the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven, the Reverend Price adds, he wasn't talking about the afterlife. In line with Jewish tradition, his focus was very much upon the world we lived in here and now, and the way the world would be if God were in charge and not Caesar. That absolutely is a message that the kingdom of God is at hand. The kingdom of God is here within you. What Jesus brings is a message that the world can be different. As we live that out, his light grows and shines in brighter and ultimately becomes reality. Father Dario Miranda, Saint Rose of the Lima Roman Catholic Church, Maywood, California. In lieu of the traditional midnight mass, California is under a nighttime curfew in hopes of tamping down on the surge of COVID-19 cases, Father Dario Miranda will offer an outdoor Christmas Eve service, which will also be live streamed. His church has been meeting outside since July, he adds. My message will be based on the experience of Mary and Joseph, who had to travel through challenges as migrants, as people on the move, as people under the Roman Empire being oppressed and exploited. Father Miranda, who immigrated to America from Mexico 35 years ago, adds, the experience of the Holy Family is an experience we can relate to as immigrants. The church is situated on the southeastern edge of Los Angeles in a community that is 96% Latino, one of the groups hardest by COVID-19. As Father Miranda's congregation has been deeply affected by the pandemic, he says he has struggled with a sense of powerlessness. Father Miranda says that he has traveled to Bethlehem more times than he can count. One of his favorite places is Shepherd's Field. In the neighboring village of Beit Sahor, there an angel appeared to the shepherds and announced the birth of baby Jesus, a moment that will play a large part in his Christmas homily. The shepherds, who were the least in the scale of the society, the message of joy and hope was brought to them. They lived in poverty and exploitation and were segregated from much of the population, and it is to them that the angel appeared. The shepherds, Father Miranda reflects, were filled with joy and hope. They took those feelings out into the world. And this is us, he says, of the Latino community. Our heart is full of joy and hope, and we have the strength to pull through and overcome challenges. President Andy Lustig, stake president for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Boynton Beach, Florida. Reflecting on the President Lustig, who had a severe case of COVID-19 that required hospitalization, says it's been difficult to lead when you can't minister in person. He emphasizes that Christmas isn't about tree or gifts. I don't know where we get this whole tree thing from, President Lustig says, adding, the holiday is not about gift giving, it's not about Santa, it's about honoring the birth of his Savior and being grateful. That aligns with the church's official message. Speaking earlier this month, Church President Russell M. Nelson urged members to rivet our focus on the Savior and on the gift of what his life truly means to each of us. President Lustig, who was born and raised Jewish but converted to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in 2000, shared the 4 points he will convey via email to the 10 Latter-day Saint congregations that he presides over in a straightforward, no muss, no fuss manner. His words tinge with the accent of his New York City birthplace. First, we should be grateful for our living prophet, President Russell M. Nelson. He prepared us for the pandemic before it happened with Come Follow Me, the program that has shifted the emphasis toward home worship. 2, I want to remind them that you can rely on the Lord, but you have to try your hardest. Do your best and he'll do the rest. President Lustig likens a lack of effort to high school students who go into a test unprepared but hoping to do well. We have to do our part, he says, and then hand the rest over to the Lord. President Lustig's third point is short and simple. They need to have faith, unwavering faith. And lastly, we are living in a contentious time with this presidential election and the election that will happen in Georgia. Despite the elections, we need to love each other unconditionally. I've seen friendships broken over this election. Democrats and Republicans who no longer speak to each other put everything aside and love one another unconditionally. The Reverend Kathy Gillard, Park Avenue United Methodist Church, New York City, New York. What is Christmas really, the Reverend Gillard asks, or says? It's about love and it's about presence. It's about God saying, I want to be present with you. I want to be with you. God stepped down in the midst of times that are like these. God came in the midst of the chaos and adversity and the hopelessness, she says. What does it mean to say, especially this year, that there is one who has come amidst this for me and us in the world? How am I paying attention in the midst of the hostility? Let's don't miss him amidst the hardness of this time and amid our fragility. Let's don't miss him when we are so weighed down individually. Contemplating how we can be present for God, the Reverend Gabbard explains that while it might seem paradoxical, sometimes being present means saying we are afraid. Sometimes as believers it's the hardest thing to admit, fear and anxiety and fragility, she says. That feels less than faithful, but it's okay to not be okay every minute. The Reverend Gabbard points out that in the Bible, whenever angels presented themselves to humans, their first words were, "Do not be afraid." This is an important part of the story of Christmas, she adds. The first thing the angels did was to arrest the fear. There are angels in our midst today, but we have to be able to listen and hear them. And once our fears have been arrested, faith is able to help us say, why were you really afraid? The Reverend Gabbard, who is the first long-term black pastor in Park Avenue United Methodist Church's 184-year history and only the second woman to lead the congregation, said that by admitting our deepest fears, we can overcome them. And that's how we can move forward, both as individuals and as a nation. If we were less afraid, what might our country, what might our world look like? The Reverend John Foster, Big Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church, Atlanta, Georgia. The angel gives the shepherds instructions. The angel tells them, "He can be found in a manger in Bethlehem," says the Reverend Foster, who will deliver his Christmas Eve sermon via live stream, adding that we should all go look for the baby Jesus. That journey should first take us inward, explains the Reverend Foster. We should look for the salvation God has in all of us. We should be seeking our presence, our true dedication, just as the angel told the shepherds to go find baby Jesus. By finding that individual purpose, we manifest God's glory, says the Reverend Foster, who leads a church that was established in 1847, almost 2 decades before slavery ended, and that remains a pillar of the city's black community today. The best we can do in our life is to realize what our true purpose and true meaning is. That's my message. Whether talking about the shepherds, the wise men, any of the characters in the Christmas story. After coming in contact with what God wants us to be, we should be different and be energized, says the Reverend Foster. God's will for us can range from helping people who stay afloat during the pandemic to helping people to vote, he adds. By using the lesson of the angel's announcement of Jesus' birth to empower the South, individuals can go out and empower their communities. Very, very wise words from 5 church leaders, and I have to say, it brings me it gives me a lot of encouragement as well. You know, there is one song that I like but don't like. It's called "I'll Be Home for Christmas," and it's also in the title of an American Thinker article by Fiona C.M.E. Elliott. She says, "I'll Be Home for Christmas," originally recorded by Bing Crosby in 1943, tells the story of a soldier riding home while stationed abroad during World War II. He pleads for his family to have mistletoe and presents by the tree upon his hopeful return, knowing all along that Christmas this year will only come to life in the cold, hard bunk of his barracks as he closes his eyes and dreams of a better place and a better time. "If only in my dreams" is a lyric that has transcended time, as old wars have ended and new ones begun, always reminding us of the courageous soldiers who have sacrificed every bit of who they are to defend our nation, especially at Christmas time. "I'll Be Home for Christmas" is a song dedicated to the fathers in uniform who won't be home to dress as Santa Claus this Christmas Eve, and the mothers of young children who will miss seeing the magic of Christmas in her child's eyes, a magic that only lasts for so long. The song honors the ones left behind, the husbands and wives, sons and daughters, sisters and brothers, grandparents, friends and neighbors holding the fort at home, praying for the safe return of their loved ones, perhaps even a Christmas miracle, and their sacrifice is for you, is for me, is for our freedom. This year, I'll Be Home for Christmas tells a different story. It tells the story of the millions of Americans at home who will spend Christmas alone, and not because they want to, but because their governors and mayors have obligated them to do so. Christmas is canceled due to COVID. It is now your moral duty to stay home. Skip that Christmas Mass at your local church. Cancel your visit to Grandma's. Decline any holiday party that make you feel human again. Apparently 9 months of lockdowns, shutdowns, mass directives, and social distancing haven't done a thing to quell the spread. So let's throw in a few more unconstitutional mandates to keep the tyranny going. In fact, according to the CDC, if you forego their first guideline to limit gatherings, you are encouraged to eat outdoors. Well, I guess catching pneumonia in the frigid cold is a small price to pay in stopping the spread of COVID. Wear masks, even in between bites. According to California Governor Gavin Newsom, a request so ridiculous he himself chose to forego wearing a mask as he wined and dined on oysters and pearls at the lavish French Laundry restaurant in Napa Valley. Or perhaps it was the Elysian Farm Field sperm lamb shank that made it worth tossing the mask aside. We'll never know. But as for your holiday party, don't forget to take down the mistletoe because social distancing is strictly enforced. And my personal favorite, cancel the carolers because singing is strongly discouraged. So is quote-unquote chanting. Another fine constraint issued by none other than Governor Newsom. Interestingly, if you look up chanting in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, you'll find that includes celebrating or praising in song. Sure sounds like a lot of prayer. Sure sounds a lot like prayer to me. Now, keeping in mind all that is prohibited this holiday season, let's have a look back at what has apparently been deemed safe and permissive these last few months. Riots, marches, lootings, protests, Black Lives Matter chants, and I'm sure a healthy dose of shouting along the way. In fact, at one point, tens of thousands of protesters gathered in Portland, Houston, New York City. The list goes on, all in the name of George Floyd. And these protests lasted more than a holiday dinner's worth of time. They lasted from night into day into night again for months and months on end. Our cities were set on fire. Violence erupted and racial tensions were exacerbated. It is not a pretty picture to paint, but it is one we cannot forget in the face of these new unprecedented restrictions placed on our nation, our neighborhoods, and our families, in the privacy of our own homes, no less, with the holidays just around the corner. Now, I must be clear, for some, especially those most at risk of COVID-19, staying home is a safer option. It is a sacrifice that does not go unnoticed, and for you, I'll be home for Christmas will mean more than it ever has. I think of you this year and wish you peace as you battle through these incredibly lonesome and difficult times, remembering the magic of the season in years past. But for those who choose to stay home because you have been made to believe that this is the right and moral thing to do, if fear has gotten the very best of you, I only ask that you consider if these sacrifices, these restrictions, are logical, rational, and more importantly, are they worth it? Now tomorrow is not promised to anyone, COVID or no COVID. So who is to say if next Christmas will be? What it all really comes down to is choice, and that choice stems from freedom. A freedom our soldiers look death straight in the eye to protect. May we never forget the sacrifice these men and women make to defend the freedoms our government officials are so recklessly taking away from us. These government-issued mandates have crossed the line and crossed the sacred threshold into our homes. This is as slippery a slope as it gets. And so this year I choose to spend Christmas with my family. I choose to walk through the streets of my local town, shop locally in person, buy a big ham from my local meat market, and turn the Christmas carols up on high. That is my choice, and it may not be yours, and that's okay. But that is the beauty of freedom. May we all have ourselves a merry little Christmas. Very wise words, and I will definitely, and I think I'll go ahead and leave it at that because, I mean, basically, that's all that needs to be said. I wish you a very Merry Christmas, and I'll see you in the next one. Christmas, and I would like to wish each and every one of you a very Merry Christmas, and I hope that you got the gifts that you wanted. And while we are on the subject, how are people celebrating Christmas during a pandemic? Got this from the Associated Press. It's called A Pandemic Christmas. Services move online, people stay home. Families that usually reunite on Christmas over a hearty, lingering meal stayed home Friday. Services were held online and gift exchanges were low-key in one of the most unusual holiday seasons in decades. The coronavirus left almost no one unaffected. Patricia Hager, 60, delivered homemade caramel rolls for breakfast to family and friends in Bismarck, North Dakota, a state that didn't get hit until later in the pandemic but got hit hard. It seemed every time she opened her door this holiday season, someone had left smoked salmon, baskets of nuts, or cookies. This year, Christmas, love is expressed at the door, she said. I'm glad that people will probably be with us next year with the vaccines. I can give up anything for that. With a child due in February, Song Hyu-jung of Paju, South Korea, near Seoul, said home is the only place she feels safe. The government reported 1,241 new cases Friday, a new daily record for the country. It doesn't feel like Christmas anyway, so there's no carols being played in the streets, she said. It's Christmas, the Daily Nation newspaper declared in Korea, where a surge in cases led to a doctor's ending a brief strike Christmas Eve. Celebrations were muted in the East Africa hub as a curfew prevented overnight church vigils. Pope Francis delivered his Christmas blessing from inside the Vatican, breaking with his traditional speech from the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica to tens of thousands in St. Peter's Square. Tourism in Italy has virtually vanished, and the government's coronavirus restrictions for the holidays foiled any plans by locals to flock to the square. Citing a cause for optimism, Francis said the invention of COVID-19 vaccine shines, quote-unquote, lights of hope on the world. In a passionate appeal to leaders, businesses, and international organizations, he said they must ensure that the most vulnerable and needy in the pandemic be first in line to receive the vaccines. Bells rang out around Bethlehem as the traditional birthplace of Jesus celebrated, but the closure of Israel's international airport to foreign tourists, along with Palestinian restrictions and banning intercity travel in the areas they administer in the Israeli-occupied West Bank, kept visitors away. In Beijing, official churches abruptly canceled Mass after China's capital was put on high alert following 2 confirmed COVID-19 cases last week. 2 new asymptomatic cases were reported Friday. With economies reeling around the world, it wasn't a year of lavish gifts. Robin Sipniewski of Middlesex County, New Jersey, was furloughed twice from her job serving school lunches and is now on reduced hours as her husband retires next week as a trash collector and her daughter wrestles with student debt. Sipniewski, 58, bought her daughter pajamas compared to a diamond bracelet last Christmas. Her husband got a $20 plaque describing his Polish heritage compared to a tablet computer last year. The bills have to be paid this month and next month. With reduced hours, it's tough, she said. In Sao Paulo, Brazil, taxi driver Denis Abreu, 56, navigated the vast city overnight to cover the $300 monthly payment on his car, which he bought after losing a construction job. An estimated 14 million Brazilians are jobless. All I can do is work as much as I can, get by, and hope this damn virus disappears next year, he said. Church services shifted online. The Catholic Archdiocese of Los Angeles celebrated 5 masses at the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels, with audience capped at 130 people compared to a pre-pandemic capacity of about 3,000. All were live streamed. The Chapel of the Cross in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, stuck with 5 services, but in-person attendance was capped at 25 people, compared to as many as 2,000 before the pandemic. A Christmas Eve pageant that is normally performed in person was recorded and shown online. I have to remember that Christians have been celebrating Christmas for hundreds of years in all sorts of circumstances, said the Reverend Elizabeth Marie Malachonia, the church rector. Some of the external appearances are different, and yet the essence remains the same. What has not changed is the essential longing and celebration for the love that is born at Christmas. In Paris, members of the Notre Dame Cathedral's choir sang inside the church for the first time since the 2019 fire, wearing hard hats and protective suits against construction conditions. Border closures and bottlenecks spoiled some plans. Thousands of drivers were stranded in their trucks at the English port of Dover, lacking the coronavirus test that France demands amid rising concern about a new, apparently more contagious virus variant. The British Army and French firefighters were brought in to help speed up the testing, and free food was distributed. With Colombia closing its borders to prevent the virus from spreading, Venezuelan migrants couldn't go home for the holidays. Jacqueline Tamor, a nurse who left economically wrecked Venezuela 2 years ago, wanted to visit her mother who was nursing a broken foot. I tried to send her money, but it's not the same as being there, she said. Many took the restrictions in stride. A pre-pandemic Christmas in Ann Arbor, Michigan for Kristen Schrader, 53, been hosting a big dinner with the appetizers for her brother who visits from Denver, her parents who live in town, and friends who drop by. This year she opted for a socially distant outing with her husband and 13-year-old daughter to watch a man dressed as Santa Claus canoe down the Huron River with his dog. A low-key fondue dinner was also on the agenda. It's just really hard when you all be sitting in the same house and muster up a lot of excitement for the three of us when we're just staring at each other for months and months on end, she said. The 70 residents at St. Peter's, a nursing home in the northern Spanish town of El Astillero, held video chats or 30-minute visits with families separated by a plexiglass wall. The terrible thing has come to us, so we must accept it and deal with patience, said Mercedes Arejola, who met with her mother. The nursing home allowed only one relative inside. Her granddaughter blew kisses from outside. And I mean, 2020 has really shaken all of us up. And here's hoping that 2021 will be a little bit better. And while we are on the subject of this pandemic Christmas, we have this from the Federalist pondering the meaning of Christmas in our hardest years. Christmas is the most wondrous day of our calendar in any year of our lives. The bright lights, smells, and smiles discernible even to an infant quickly grow into a sense of hope, awe, and mystery as young boys and girls crane their necks on the car ride back from Papa's house to look out the window for a sign of that bright red nose in the sky. As time moves on, our hopes turn to the company of family and friends, and our awe to the sacred mysteries of God made man in our sake, or for our sake. Our experience of Christmas changes as we grow older. While the fortunate ones spend childhood ignorant of the troubles between men, and maybe even their own families, over the years our broken world comes into focus, and hopefully we come to understand that Christ came among us not to sing carols, but because we have gone astray. This year has been America's worst in a long while. We've seen our churches boarded up by those who think God merely a hobby. Our elderly have died alone under the orders of those who think it's better for their health this way. Our livelihoods have been shattered, and even that fleeting innocence of childhood has been taken from mass boys and girls not allowed to go to school or play on public swings. But for those children whose innocence is injured too early, Christmas time can still bring wonder. The smell of the tree and of mom making cookies fills many houses, even for those in broken homes or those who don't celebrate. Main Street and the park downtown are filled with bright lights. There are candles in windows and sometimes even carolers and Christmas concerts on the road. This year was a hard one. Many of my friends suffered more hardship than I, although loneliness and anger stalked us all. And since the moment Halloween ended and All Saints' Day dawned, I've been excited for Christmas with what feels like the hope of a young child. Christmas and all the traditions it welcomes. Our best celebrations of the coming of our Lord swirl like a Christmas globe around nostalgia. It calls up the music our parents and grandparents played to ring in the season, special ornaments and decorations passed down through family, familiar hymns sung by millions before us, and those candles our ancestors lit to let Mary and Joseph know there is room in this home for their heavenly child. When we're older, we have to make the cookies our mothers once made, but with some written instructions. A bit of a mess, and maybe a call home, it can be done. Family might be more spread out now, but if they are our friends and neighbors, can fill our tables. And even if it's been a hard year, we can remember what this life is about, surrounded by the artifacts and traditions of generations past. On Monday night, an older Hindu friend who's had to work two jobs, making less than he did in 2019 in order not have to leave his adopted home, told me he set up his Christmas tree too. Our children are American, he said. They love all the holidays. We spoke of the lights, smells, and music in the air in December and January, and how they fill us with the warmth and sense of comfort much needed at the end of this year. Soon, he said, it will be a new year. This year, let us remember the good times we've had and the good times to come, even while saying goodbye to some too soon. We've also welcomed new lives into our families and among our friends. Although for many there might be less under the tree or fewer at our table, our faith in God remains strong. And the songs, traditions, and tales passed down from those who celebrated Christmases past in trenches, basement shelters, empty homes, and sometimes without even a home, just as the Holy Family can keep us warm wherever we find ourselves. She wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn, the Gospel of Luke tells us. The child was indeed holy, the Son of God, and he saved his people from their sins. Merry Christmas. And that is and that is so true, and that's why Jesus is the reason for the season. Yesterday I had read something about the song I'll Be Home for Christmas from the American Thinker. I have another American Thinker article today. It's entitled The Bells of Christmas by Christopher S. Brownell. If ever there was a year we needed Christmas, 2020 is that year. COVID-19, thousands of deaths, racial strife, massive election fraud that has unmasked deep corruption at all levels of government, moral cowardice from politicians, Chinese infiltration. But as bleak as 2020 was, America has seen years that were at least as bad. Christmas 1864 was a dreary one for Henry Wadsworth Longfellow as he sat down to draft his poem Christmas Bells. He had been through personal anguish over the recent years. The nation was in the throes of a costly domestic conflict. The American Civil War would eventually end the lives of up to 800,000 Americans, over 2% of the population. The horrible reality of that war would eventually come home to Longfellow. Peace on earth, goodwill to men seemed unrealistic, if not an outright lie. With those stories of war tragedies would cause the nation to mourn. In 1861, Longfellow suffered a more personal tragedy. Out of that personal tragedy and the horrors of the Civil War, Longfellow would pen his hopeful Christmas bells poem on Christmas Day 1864. That poem would later become the inspiration for the Christmas carol, I heard the bells on Christmas Day. I heard the bells on Christmas Day, their old familiar carols play, and wild and sweet the words repeat, of peace on earth, goodwill to men, and thought how as the day had come, the belfries of all Christendom had rolled along that unbroken song of peace on earth, goodwill to men. On July 10, 1861, in their home in Cambridge, Massachusetts, Longfellow's wife Fanny had just finished clipping some of her daughter's curly hair. Fanny wanted to clip Edith's locks as a keepsake. She placed them in an envelope and began melting wax with a candle to seal it. The flame from the candle engulfed her dress. Longfellow, who had been napping, rushed to her aid and attempted to use his own body to extinguish the flames. He sustained severe burns to his arms, hands, and face. Sadly, his wife died on the morning of July 11, just 2 days before their 18th wedding anniversary. Too wounded from his burns and grief-stricken, Longfellow did not attend his wife's funeral. A profound melancholy fell on Longfellow, though he tried to conceal it. A month after his wife's death, he confided in his wife's sister, Mary Appleton Mackintosh. How I am alive after what my eyes have seen, I know not. I am at least patient, if not resigned, and thank God hourly, as I live from the beginning, for the beautiful life we led together, and that I loved her more and more to the end. That first Christmas after Fanny's death was a disconsolate one for Longfellow. He wrote, how inexpressibly sad are all holidays. A year later, his journal entry for December 25, 1862 was no more cheerful. A Merry Christmas, say the children, but that is no more for me. The death of Fanny was not the first of Longfellow's tragedies. In 1835, while in the Netherlands, his first wife Mary became ill, miscarried their child, and died shortly thereafter. Then in 1848, after having been remarried, Longfellow's daughter, also named Fanny, died at 1 year old. His September 11 journal entry reads, lower and lower. Through the silent, desolate room the clocks tick loud. They all seem laboring on with a fatal hour. At 4:30 this afternoon she died. Her breathing grew fainter, 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 and ceased without a sigh, without a flutter, perfectly quiet, perfectly painless. The sweetest expression was on her face. Death seemed lovelier than life. The room was full of angels where she lay, and when they had departed, she was gone. The man who had buried 2 wives and 2 children experienced the horrors of the Civil War. In March 1863, the Civil War had been raging for nearly 2 years. Longfellow's son Charles left their Massachusetts home unannounced, traveled to Washington, D.C., and enlisted in the Union Army. Within weeks of his enlistment, Charles secured a commission as a second lieutenant in the 1st Massachusetts Cavalry, likely through some family connections. As a new second lieutenant in April and May 1863, Charles saw little action, spending most of his time guarding the supply wagons during the Battle of Chancellorsville. Then in early June, Charles fell ill with typhoid fever or malaria. His father rushed to his side, making the trip from Massachusetts. For the next 2.5 months, Charles would be laid up amidst the Battle of Gettysburg. He returned to his unit on August 14. In September 1863, Charles saw his first heavy action near Culpeper, Virginia. On November 27, 1863, the day after Thanksgiving, his 1st Massachusetts Cavalry part of General George Meade's Army of the Potomac, was the leading regiment in the march of the 2nd Cavalry Division toward Gordonsville, Georgia. After coming through a clearing, the advancing Union troops were met with shot from the Confederate cavalry pickets. In the initial skirmish of what would later be known as the Mine Run Campaign, Charles was shot through his shoulder. The bullet entered in his left shoulder, passed through his back, and before exiting under his right shoulder blade, it nicked his spinal cord. During dinner in his home in Massachusetts on December 1st, Longfellow received a telegram that erroneously informed him his son was severely wounded in the face. He immediately left for Washington, D.C., arriving on December 3rd. With the military pass to Virginia, Longfellow looked for his son. He found Charles in Alexandria, Virginia, and escorted him back to D.C. There, a military surgeon informed the elder Longfellow that his son might become paralyzed. Although other surgeons gave a more hopeful prognosis, Charles's recovery would be long and uncertain. Then from each black, accursed mouth, the cannon thundered in the south, and with the sound, the kills drowned. A peace on earth, goodwill to men. And in despair I bowed my head. There is no peace on earth, I said, for hate is strong, and mocks the song. A peace on earth, goodwill to men. The church bells on Christmas rang out the message of the gospel from Luke chapter 2, verse 14. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men. Yet this declaration appeared to be a lie. Profound sorrow, war, death, and destruction permeated both the North and South. What peace? Brother was at war with brother. What goodwill to men? With the horror of seeing his wife engulfed in flames, and his son nearly lose his life in war? Longfellow despaired despite the calling of the church bells. Longfellow wrote to a friend, I have been through a great deal of trouble and anxiety. His journal did not capture his thoughts on Christmas 1863. But his despair did not last. Then pealed the bells more loud and deep. God is not dead, nor doth he sleep. The wrong shall fail, the right prevail, with peace on earth, goodwill to men. Amid the set of his tragedies and hardships, on Christmas Day, 1864, Longfellow captured his irrepressible hope. His experiences told him the gospel was alive, but his trust in a God overwhelmed his sense of despair. God is not dead. He is not asleep. He is not weak or powerless. When all was said and done, God, who so humbly entered this world that first Christmas morn, had shouted in triumph, it is finished, on the cross. The work of redemption prevails. The work of evil will fail. There will be peace on earth. God and sinners will be reconciled. No cannonade, no tragic death, no pain or suffering can prevent the triumph of Christmas. The hope announced by Christmas bells can still be heard. Though the events of 2020 may make it seem like it is always winter and never Christmas, the bells peal the hope of Christmas all the more loudly. God has made a way of salvation and life for us. Despite tragic deaths from COVID-19 or the threat to liberty from lockdowns, or the massive election fraud and corruption at all levels of government, the message of the gospel announces the defeat of evil and the triumph of righteousness. So you may face the loneliness and the heartache of loss, the Christmas bells peal their proclamation that the redemption of creation is here. Do not despair. Let the bells of Christmas renew your hope of peace on earth, goodwill to men. And that is so very true. I mean, you know, even though all may seem lost, God and Jesus Christ are always with us. And it just feels so good. And speaking of Jesus Christ, there if you want to know what it's like to spend Christmas in Bethlehem, where Jesus just was born, the Deseret News had written about it in an in-depth article by Maya Gerardot, what it was like to spend Christmas in Belgium. With the West Bank on lockdown because of the COVID-19 pandemic, Christmas in Bethlehem will look different this year. But in my memory, it still exists as it did in 2013, when I lived just 400 meters from the Church of the Nativity. My apartment was on the ground floor of a centuries-old Arab mansion full of windows and light and hard-painted floor tiles and vaulted ceilings that reminded me every day of a cathedral. The Christmas season I spent in Bethlehem forever changed my meaning of the holiday and its meaning for Christians, Muslims, and yes, even some Jews like me. It also complicated my assumptions about the Middle East, birthplace of all the Abrahamic religions. For the tree lighting, Mohammed, my now husband, and I joined the crowd on Manger Square, a simple plaza made of the same sand-colored limestone that covers the rest of Bethlehem. Rock that glows peach at sunrise and gold at sunset. Singing quiet at midday, rock that renders the city magical. It is anchored by the Church of the Nativity. Directly across the square stands the Mosque of Omar. The unlit tree stood in between the two houses of worship. Among the many faces that were turned expectantly toward the display, I was surprised to find hijabi women and their families. When I asked Muhammad why there are so many Muslims there, he reminded me that in Islam, Jesus, in Arabic, is considered a prophet. Though his birthday isn't a holiday for Muslim Palestinians, some partake in the celebration by coming to see the tree and lights decorating Bethlehem's old city. Bethlehem Rira Baboon, a Christian Palestinian woman who had been elected the year before, took the stage alongside the tree for the big moment. It is now time to light the tree of Christmas, in the capital of Christmas, to shine brightness and hope to the world at large and to remain a glorious memory in our heart. As Baboon began counting down in Arabic, Ashara 10, a band began to play. She hit Wahad 1, and the tree remained dark. I held my breath. I felt a flurry of hope, both and disappointment, and then the tree lit, a star glowing red on top. The Muslim and Christian crowd roared. Relieved and moved by the cheering around me, tears rushed to my eyes. Embarrassed by both my doubt and the magnitude of my relief, I turned away from the lights and away from Mohammed, who would surely think I was nuts for crying, and concentrated on the crowd, searching for familiar faces. There was a chance, of course, that I would see someone I knew from inside, from Israel, as every year a number of Jewish Israelis sneak out to Bethlehem, an area that is legally off limits to us, for the event. Some who were too scared to go into the Palestinian territories or fearful of breaking Israeli law head to the Arab majority towns and cities north of Israel to see the Christmas lights and experience the holiday. It's not ours, but both the timing and spirit are close to Hanukkah, and for some of us, the shared kindling of light and hope resonates. Thinking back to that night in Bethlehem now at the end of this difficult year, I keep returning to that moment between the countdown and the tree sparking to life. That moment when the darkness enveloping the tree seemed even darker because it wasn't supposed to be there, because it defied my expectations. And just when I began to panic, just when I began to lose faith, it came. The light. Just as it did in the beginning, as it always does when we're certain it won't. When we're certain that the flame inside is all but dead, God whispers into our hearts, kindling it, kindling us, again and again. And, I mean, stories like that really bring out the true meaning of Christmas. It's not about the gifts. It's not about the food. It's about family. It's about honoring Jesus Christ, who died for us so we can get back to him and to God the Father. Again, I want to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas, and leave a comment below as to how you celebrated Christmas, and what your plans for after Christmas will be. And I'll see you in the next one. And that's going to do it for the news for this week. I am Mick Bulow. Again, if you like what you watch, please go ahead and hit the thumbs up button. Also subscribe and tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell an enemy or two even. And I will be back next week. Until next time, peace.